All right, it is time for a Shannon Reads Those Books book review Within the Skin of a Lion by Michael Ondaatje. Woohoo! Oh my goodness gracious. It has been a long time since I've done a review for those books book, but In the Skin of the Lion, it is time. This is a book that is my 20th book on my Those Books exploration. It was written in 1987, and it makes the list for being on the 25 Canadian classic novels list. And it just generally, for me, it really just is. If I just made up my own list of those books, it would make the list without question. It is Canadian, was nominated for the Governor General's Award, and it's actually in a way, a lot of people are probably most familiar with The English Patient, which is in some ways apparently a sequel to this. I haven't read The English Patient. I sold a bajillion copies of it when it came out, but I haven't read it, and I don't know if I will. But that's because the beginning of the movie really I found really distressing. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about In the Skin of a Lion. And wow, I really, really enjoyed this book. What popped up on the list for me as I was doing this book bingo thing, and it said to read a book that is set where you are. And this one is set in Toronto, and it's set in when Toronto, a lot of the historical landmarks, some of it is set around the Bloor, what is it called? The viaduct? The bridge. That's what I'm drawing here. The bridge, if anyone's taken the Bloor Danforth line, it is the bridge around Broadview. That bridge, some of it is set around that. And so like for me, like I don't normally read a lot of historical fiction that's based in real events. Sometimes I'll read historically set stuff, but it's totally fictional. This is actually really looking into the history of Toronto, and it's actually a bit of an I think a lot of the, from what I've read, the research I've done, a lot of the emphasis and the desire was to sort of shed a light on some unsung heroes, especially in terms of building the bridge. Now, it's not all about the bridge, that is part of it. It mostly follows one character through different, from upbringing to being in Toronto to doing sort of odd jobs, and then there's this sort of political element to it as well. And it's one of those ones that it's weird because I loved it. There are moments that I will never forget in this book. Tragic, beautiful moments that visually I can just stunningly see and feel in my body what was happening. And for that, I just adore it. But then when I read up about it, and I'm seeing that it's about the unsung heroes, and then there's sort of this political element which does sort of run through the book, that I couldn't quite always grasp what was going on. It's one of those ones that I kind of wish I had read it in school or read it with a group. I think it is one that it helps to read it from an informed perspective or research on it. Not trying to, not trying to scare anyone away from reading Canadian fiction. I never want to do that, and I'm sure a lot of people love that. For me, when I come to a book, I don't feel like I should need to have done any kind of prerequisite to read it, other than if it's in a series, read the books before it, and not all series are like that. I feel like it should stand on its own, and it does. For me, it's all added value when I read up on it, but there were some parts that I felt like I didn't quite get what was, like, I could tell that there was a deeper message here, but I didn't know what it was. And that's actually part of the adventure I find of reading, because you can continue to engage the discussion afterwards or look up the historical context and the author's intention and stuff like that. But for this one, I was like, wow, this is a cut above. Like, it's a little more heavy, it's a little more like it's saying something. I would say it's poetic. Like, there's definitely some of the moments were just extraordinary, and the ideas of threading the characters together. And but on the other hand, sometimes I felt like I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't know how we got to A from B. I actually, until I read up a review or it on Wikipedia, I did not know that it followed one person for the entire time. I thought sometimes it was different people. So there was that. There was definitely one section where I was like, I don't really know what's going on. I don't know how we got here. I don't know what's going on. I understand there's a real intensity going on in this character. I don't know where it's coming from. So it's hard because I loved it, but there were lots of challenges with it too, in terms of understanding it, but not lots of challenges. There was one section I didn't quite understand, and I'll admit I did not know it was about the same person from start to finish. I didn't pick up on that. It didn't feel like the same person. But I love that it was set in Toronto. I love that it pulled from Toronto's history. I love that it, wasn't afraid to shine a light on some of the lesser known and certainly not nicer things about, some of the elements of history. I think that's very brave. I really just thought it was a beautiful, beautiful work, and it holds me, like I hold it in my heart. The story, the triumph, the tragedy, the wonders of it. I feel like I'm not saying anything about what it's actually about, and this happens to me like every time I talk about a Canadian book. It's because it just feels like it's about life. It's about, like, what was happening. It feels so, even though it was set, trying to remember, like, I should have looked that up. I'll put it in. Even though it was set not, in current Toronto, because there's certain things that I know where they are, I know what they mean, or I use them on a regular basis. There's something, there's a normalcy and an understanding, and neighborhoods that I've lived in, like, there's a connection there that I really felt. And I don't always think that in fiction. Like when I'm reading about something that's somewhere else, I don't think about, you know, the geography in terms of what it would mean to someone if they've been there. But when it's about your home, or where it's about a place that you've been, there is an added layer. And I think that that's true. I still think about that from when I went to San Francisco, to visit my brother, and all of a sudden I was like, oh wow, like I actually know this location, or remember this from a movie, or like there is an added layer there. And that's really true. I think it's a bit weird. I think it's strange to connect with something stronger because you've been there, but I also recognize the truth of it, and that might throws my head in a bit of a loop. My brain's still years later trying to work that one out. Anyway, back to the book. I highly recommend it. I just absolutely adored it, and I really, really think, like, it's well known. It is a huge Canadian novel, and it's actually not huge. I read it like not in like a week. I read it a little faster than I was comfortable with, but I think it's well worth reading, and I would highly recommend it. And I just think it was extraordinary. So I'm really happy to have read it, and I'm continuing to really love and appreciate Canadian fiction, and I've been very happy that I put a priority on that. And I try and read one a month, and they're a bit heavier, so that's a bit hard, but it's definitely been worth it. This one I didn't read it as long, but it really sat with me, and I really stuck with it, and looked it up and read up about it, which I normally is not something I always do, and not something I always enjoy. And this one I was curious and engaged and wanted to know more, and that's always a good sign. So there you go, In the Skin of the Lion. I would love to hear people's take on it. If you have read it, if you are interested in reading it, I definitely recommend it. So there you go, those books, number 20. Woohoo! Thanks for watching.